All right. Looks like we're going to be able to meet this on time. I was off by a few minutes, but it is what it is. So, 2 days ago, August 22nd, Sanders released his presidential campaign's environmental plan, and it was pretty sexy. I would definitely not use a condom if it were of the opposite sex. So, I'm going to read some parts of it, and then I can discuss it after the fact. Okay, so this is upon his website. It starts: the crisis is not only the single greatest challenge facing our country, it is also our single greatest opportunity to build a more just and equitable future. We must act immediately. Climate change is a global emergency. The Amazon rainforest is burning, Greenland's ice shelf is melting, and the Arctic is on fire. People across the country and the world are already experiencing the deadly consequences of our climate crisis, as extreme weather events like heat waves, wildfires, droughts, floods, and hurricanes upend entire communities, ecosystems, economies, and ways of life, as well as endanger millions of lives. Communities of color, working class people, and the global poor have borne and will bear this burden disproportionately. The scientific community is telling us in no uncertain terms that we have less than 11 years left to transform our energy system away from fossil fuels to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. If we are going to leave this planet healthy and habitable for ourselves, our children, grandchildren, and future generations, as rising temperatures and extreme weather create health emergencies, drive land loss and displacement, destroy jobs, and threaten livelihoods, we must guarantee health care, housing, and a good paying job to every American, especially to those who have been historically excluded from economic prosperity. The scope of the challenge ahead of us shares similarities with the crisis faced by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1940s. Battling a world war on two fronts, both in the East and West, the United States came together and within 3 short years restructured the entire economy in order to win the war and defeat fascism. As President Bernie Sanders will boldly embrace the moral imperative of addressing the climate crisis and act immediately to mobilize millions of people across the country in support of the Green New Deal. From the Oval Office to the streets, Bernie will generate the political will necessary for a wholesale transformation or society with support for frontline and vulnerable communities and massive investments in sustainable energy, energy efficiency, and a transformation of our transportation system. I've actually watched, just as a little thing to cut away from here, they've had a couple of different speeches that Sanders has given where he's talked about if he won the election, becoming the organizer in chief, where because people often say, "Oh, well, you can't get the moderate Democrats and the Republicans to, uh, get over here and do this stuff and blah blah blah. Bipartisanship, you got to get that to pass anything." So he was saying how when you put the pressure of their constituents on them, they're a lot more likely to come over or otherwise compromise and be willing to do certain things. Uh, well, he still wrote something. By the way, sir, uh, the super chat is apparently enabled. So if you want to, do your thing, we'll just saying. All right, continuing. We need a president who has the courage, the vision, and the record to face down the greed of fossil fuel executives and the billionaire class who stand in the way of climate action. We need a president who welcomes their hatred. Bernie will lead our country to enact the Green New Deal and bring the world together to defeat the existential threat of climate change. As president, Bernie Sanders will avert climate catastrophe and create 20 million jobs. As president, Bernie Sanders will launch the decade of the Green New Deal, a 10-year nationwide mobilization centered around justice and equity an equity during which climate change will be factored in virtually every area of policy, from immigration to trade to foreign policy and beyond. Two things to take away from that. Uh, so when I and others criticized Harris's healthcare plan, we criticized it for multiple things, but one of the things was that she wanted to transition to a single payer system over a 10-year period, meaning that even if she won re-election, she still wouldn't be there when it was finally implemented and would actually leave open the chance of a Republican president taking over during that 10-year period and doing the Thanos snap and getting rid of it before it can be fully implemented. So this part right here kind of has me unnerved where he talks about a 10-year nationwide mobilization effort because most of the stuff he's mentioned when it's given a time frame of when it can take place, like with his own single payer plan, it's within either a term as president or some other period where we're not really speculating and trying to figure out if you know he'll be around for it in the sense that we don't know if we are given a definitive amount of time that is within when someone is elected and when their term would finish under normal circumstances. um, this plan outlines some of the most significant goals we have set and steps we will take during this mobilization, including reaching 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030 and complete decarbonization by 2050 at latest, consistent with the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change goals by expanding the existing federal power marketing administrations to build new solar, wind, and geothermal energy sources, ending unemployment by creating 20 million jobs needed to solve the climate crisis. These jobs will be good paying union jobs with strong benefits and safety standards in steel and automaking, construction, energy efficiency, retrofitting, coding, and server farms and renewable power plants. We will also create millions of jobs in sustainable agriculture, energy, engineering, and a reimagined and expanded civilization conservation corps and preserving our public lands. So this is something else I get a little annoyed by where you don't really give specifics on things. When you say strong benefits, what exactly is that supposed to mean? It's just another one of those little things that gets me iffy when people don't specify what they're talking about. Like for as bad as Warren has kind of been getting to me over the last few weeks or month or whatever, at the very least, with her paragraph long plans, paragraphs longs. I don't even know what the proper term would be for that. You can at least say, all right, well, she at least is specifying things with all of this extra detail. Like I said, I can't, from the above, you can build. Oh, I appreciate it. Be still. Thank you very much. Economic base like other YouTubers. I a lot of times I do a stream, I can't even get like 10 people in here, so you'll have to forgive me for the cynicism, but I do appreciate the contribution. I'm trying to think of another more profound way to say thank you. I it's something that helps. It's of great aid. Uh, Let me continue with our this plan. Directly invest an historic 16.3 trillion public investment toward these efforts, in line with the mobilization of resources made during the New Deal and World War II, but with an explicit choice to include Black, Indigenous, and other minority communities who were systematically excluded in the past. Okay, a just transition for workers. This plan will prioritize the fossil fuel workers who have powered our economy for more than a century and who have too often been neglected by corporations and politicians. We will guarantee 5 years of a worker's current salary, housing assistance, job training, healthcare, pension support, and priority job placement for any displaced worker, as well as early retirement support for those who choose it or can no longer work. Yeah, because people are retiring at later ages presently. Let's see, just keep up what you do. Well, I'm just trying to express some gratitude. I'm not like a lot of these other people who feel the entitlements of it's all about and you know, I'm just saying I do appreciate those kind of things. Very few people on here are willing to take that step. Um, I think we're pretty much done with that part of this. Declaring climate change a national emergency. This is something I really like right here. We must take action to ensure a habitable planet for ourselves, for our children, and for our grandchildren. We will do whatever it takes to defeat the threat of climate change. So, like, the thing about the children and grandchildren, whatever. But the reason that's something I like is because what was the one issue Trump declared was a national emergency? Not the seven countries we're bombing, not the 76% of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck, uh, not the fact that over 40% of the homeless have jobs. No, some people coming over here illegally and working. It's like, yeah, the immigration system is screwed up, but it's something that, I'm sorry, I wouldn't even put in the top 5 of issues that I think need to be seriously addressed. And I can kind of accept giving that focus when it's appropriate, but when you just sit there and pester on about it, I kept trying to explain to people, he's not taking this issue and trying to make it, some big thing because he's so concerned about, how these people are coming over. It's because when you do the exact same thing as your immediate predecessor in bombing multiple countries just so some guys in suits and ties can give you some money on the side, um, and you also leave the banks alone like your immediate predecessor, and the only thing you really have a big substantive difference on is on environmental issues like this, and you're horrible on them because you literally want to undo. Remember the stupid EPA rule he has, where for every 2 new regulations they get rid of one just for the hell of it? When all of those things are going against you, you have to find something that you can try to make seem like, you're so strong and tough on, even as the person before you. And you can read this in other places. Obama deported more uh, immigrants than anybody else. I heard people down South America as starting random fires in the Amazon rainforest, guarantees, which generates 20% of the world's oxygen. Uh, I would have to look more into that. I don't want to condemn them yet. I think all these countries are contributing to environmental issues for the sake of clearing those lush regions for business. For the sake of, yeah. Well, of course, the corporations, man. I mean, like I said before, when you look at somebody like uh, just any of these older Republicans, right? Like Grassley or McConnell, or what's the other one? The one that had the snowball in the Senate. You might not know what I'm talking about. Inhofe. These people are all pushing into their late 70s or mid 80s. So they know that when this stuff comes back to bite us in the butt in the 11 years these scientists were talking about, a lot of them won't even be around. So it doesn't affect them. It's like if you told me the Earth is going to implode in a billion years, I won't be around for that. So, because I'm in their instance, go using as an example, a person who is all about preserving themselves, I'm just going to let the thing go on by itself. Yeah, genocidal indifference. If you know you won't be there to take the fall, you don't care. So. Saving American families money by weathering homes and lowering energy bills, building affordable and high quality modern public transportation, providing grants and trade in programs for families and small businesses to purchase high efficiency electric vehicles, and rebuilding our inefficient and crumbling infrastructure, including deploying universal affordable high speed internet. So that goes back to like how we have like an issue with broadband where there are certain states where the internet's really slow in different places and whatnot. And I like this. Not as much as the other parts, but it still is okay. Supporting small family farms by investing in ecological, regenerative, and sustainable agriculture. This plan will transform our agriculture system to fight climate change, provide sustainable local foods, and break the corporate stranglehold on farmers and ranchers. See, let me tell you why this farmer thing's a big deal. With this little stupid tariff trade war thing with China, farmers are getting impacted by it. And I would, Sanders talking about being the organizer in chief. States like Iowa and Kansas, where all Republicans are controlling, as far as the senator, or both states have 2 Republican senators, that he could so easily go and say, hey, under my interpretation of the Green New Deal, we'll give you some position that gets you away from your farm, which is currently being impacted by our trade war that started under my predecessor. You got to get your Republican senators to stop bootlicking for that guy that they want to get the votes from and actually come over and shift their position to supporting my thing. I guarantee you that that's going to be his pitch if this goes through. Um, Justice for frontline communities, especially under-resourced groups, communities of color, Native Americans, people with disabilities, children, and the elderly to recover from and prepare for the climate impacts, including through a 40 billion climate justice resiliency fund. Resiliency fund. 16 trillion sounds like way too much money. Well, I mean, my thing is this. When you've got, you remember the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? Where they were talking about how it adds trillions to the deficit, and you had these Republicans talking about, oh my God, Obama was making the deficit go up, even though to his credit, and I say this as not being a fan of his, he cut it in half. Um, I don't believe the U.S. is not going just all of these different efforts, the 700 billion we spent on the military last year and this year as well. I don't buy it that we can't afford these things. And I'm also, we talked about, well, not you and me specifically, but I had mentioned that with single payer, the whole point of that is simply saying we're actually saving money in the long run because under that system, insurance companies can't keep cracking up the prices for their own financial gain. So I'm just saying, I get what you're coming at with the stuff about the cost and whatnot, but I've seen too many Republicans who will sit here and go, "Oh my God, this domestic program costs billions or trillions." I'm a fiscal hawk, but then when there's a military budget, let me do that. A bottomless pit, it needs to be cut. Yeah, and they can't even tell you what the hell it's going to. Commit to reducing emissions throughout the world, including providing 200 billion to the Green Climate Fund, rejoining the Paris Agreement. Like right here, this 200 billion, I would have no problem with them taking that from the military budget because guess what? They take that from the one we had this year. They still have 500 billion. Like, why do they need? What are they using those hundreds of billions for? And remember, uh, whenever you think that that money is needed, ask yourself, what wars has the U.S. exited or stopped being in since Trump took over and bloated the budget? Not a single one. We're in the same seven we were on his first day. We'll be in those same seven probably when he leaves office too. He was talking a little bit of stuff about ending the war in Afghanistan. That's not going to happen. If they can stretch it out for 18 years, don't be surprised they can stretch it out for 30 or 40. Okay, commitment to reducing emissions throughout the world. Okay, I read that. Meeting. Wait, no, I didn't mention rejoining the Paris Agreement. Oh, you might not remember this, B. Still, that was a environmental pact the U.S. made under Obama, and it's another one of those things where I give him credit because it makes sense to support that. And when Trump announced he was getting out of it in I think that was like mid 2017, he was like, "Oh well, it's a bad deal for the U.S." But every single country except for Saudi Arabia, Nicaragua, and us after we left were in that agreement. So I'm supposed to believe that all of the world's different countries, right, China, places that don't even like each other, like Iran and Israel, got together and were like, "We're going to screw the U.S. over with this bad environmental deal that only affects them negatively." No, just certain stuff I can't get behind. You can sit there and claim it over and over, but I don't buy it. Meeting and exceed, like, just there are too many countries in there for me to think it was some big global conspiracy. He wanted to snub Obama. Whatever Obama did, Trump wants to undo because the narcissistic character. Hey, except for the wars, those get to stay around forever. Okay, meeting and exceeding our fair share of global emissions reductions. The United States has for over a century spewed carbon pollution emissions into the atmosphere in order to gain economic standing in the world. Therefore, we have an outsized obligation to help less industrialized nations meet their targets while improving quality of life. We will reduce domestic emissions by at least 71% by 2030 and reduce emissions among less industrialized nations by 36% by 2030, the total equivalent of reducing our domestic emissions by 161%. Another one of those things where it's like, here's my goal, but they won't tell you how it's going to be done. So it's not, stuff like that I get a little annoyed by, but it is what it is. Making massive investments in research and development. We will invest in public research to drastically reduce cost of energy storage, electric vehicles, and make our plastic more sustainable through advanced chemistry. You might not remember this person, Be Still, but uh, the 1996 running mates for the Republicans, so for the vice presidential nominee, his name was Jack Kemp, and he died about 10 years ago. And it was, I think, the day after he died, this Senator Specter, he got up in front. He had cancer, what he died from. He said he would still be alive if the U.S. took cancer research seriously, invested more in it. So that's what this reminded me of, where it's like, people want to say all this stuff is, we can't prevent it, and it's all just naturally going to happen because of things that are out of our control, but then we don't even make an effort to try and reverse it no matter what it is. Keeping it vague is a political strategy. Right, that's how people roll. I mean, look, I don't have a problem with someone stating their goal. And I'd rather, like, the other thing going for this is that not many other candidates have put out an entire environmental plan. They're not sitting there specifying what they want to do, other than rejoining the Paris Agreement, and that's about it. Okay, expanding the climate justice movement. We will do this by coming together in a truly inclusive movement that prioritizes young people, workers, indigenous people, communities of color, and other historically marginalized groups to take on the fossil fuel industry and other polluters to push this over the finish line and lead the globe in solving the climate crisis. Yeah, I heard there's like a thing where they will take pollution and put it in communities where they know the people have no choice but to just put up with it. Like one day you're driving down the street and some, uh, I guess, poor as in, the people living there are below the water, but you'll be driving through there and all of a sudden you smell something nasty coming from a sewer, and they know if they did that in the rich communities like Beverly Hills or something, people would, be knocking on doors and stuff. Plan for, he talks about around things for him to do that will cost from other demographics. Uh, I mean, to be fair, I haven't really seen any of the other ones commit to, like, the thing with me and that issue is that I've been following this stuff on an almost daily basis for 6 years, and never once between 2013 and this election cycle did I hear a single Democrat that was in the House or the Senate talk about reparations. Not one time. And then all of a sudden with this cycle, everybody wants to start bringing it up. And it's like, I'm supposed to believe you guys really are concerned about this when you completely ignored it your entire careers, in some cases for decades. So that's why when they talk about it, I'm just like, yeah, you don't really care, whatever. Investing in conservation and public lands to heal our soils, forests, and prairie lands. We will reauthorize and expand the Civilian Conservation Corps and fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Corps to provide good paying jobs building green infrastructure. This plan will pay for itself over 15 years. Experts have, oh, here's my favorite part where they go, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Because they want just bot help us. Oh, to help them, not help us. That's what. So they say this stuff to try to get our vote. Yeah, that's why I said there's only 3 candidates I would even vote for. All the other ones get completely, passed over by me. This plan will pay for itself over 15 years. Experts have scored the plan and its economic effects. We will pay for the massive investment we need to reverse the climate crisis by making the fossil fuel industry pay for their pollution through litigation fees and taxes, and eliminating federal fossil fuel subsidies, generating revenue from the wholesale of energy produced by the regional power marketing authorities. Revenue will be collected from 2023 to 2035. And after 2035, electricity will be virtually free, aside from operations and maintenance costs. Scaling back military spending on maintaining global oil dependence. Thank God. I was waiting for him to get to that one. Sick of that military spending. Collecting new income tax revenues from the 20 million new jobs created by the plan, reduce need for federal aids, state safety net spending due to the creation of millions of good paying unionized jobs, making the wealthy and large corporations pay their fair share. The cost of inaction is unacceptable. Economists estimate that if we do not take action, we will lose 34.5 trillion in economic activity by the end of the century, and the benefits are enormous. By taking bold and decisive action, we will save 2.9 trillion over 10 years, 21 trillion over 30 years, and 70.4 trillion over 80 years. Imagine someone actually lives 80 years and they're like, he did it. we do end up having 70 trillion left over. What's the guarantee of that? It reminds me of when Trump said, Mexico, what guarantee of what? I find funny that comes time to pay the tab, they say we'll make up by charging the other guys. I mean, everybody's getting charged over this stuff. Like the whole point of Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was that, oh, if we give, supply side economics, if we give rich people more money, they're gonna, invest, and they'll make a bunch of different positions for people, and then the workers will have cash and it'll all get spread around. Yeah. And then they make jobs where they pay someone a crappy wage, even if they can afford to pay you higher, because they want to save every nickel and dime they can for themselves, which is why Amazon would hire workers purposely part-time so they could get away with not paying you as much as they should. They're all doing that little slick stuff, man. You know that. We cannot accomplish any of these goals without taking on the fossil fuel billionaires whose greed lies at the very heart of the climate crisis. These executives have spent hundreds of millions of dollars protecting their profits at the expense of our future, and they will do whatever it takes to seize every last penny out of the earth. Bernie promises to go further than any other presidential candidate in history to end the fossil fuel industry's greed, including by making the industry pay for its pollution and prosecuting it for the damage it has caused. And most importantly, we must build on unprecedented grassroots movement that is powerful enough to take them on and win. Young people, advocates, tribes, cities, and states all over this country have already begun this important work, and we will continue to follow their lead. Number one, transform our energy system to 100% renewable energy and create 20 million jobs. There is no reason the United States, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, cannot transform our energy system away from fossil fuels to 100% renewable energy like wind, solar, and geothermal. We have more than enough capacity to produce ample, reliable, affordable electricity from sustainable resources. We must pass a Green New Deal to achieve 100% sustainable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030, and to fully decarbonize the economy by 2050 at latest. The federal government. Oh, did you write something else? Okay, no. I'm just making sure. I don't want you to feel like you've been left out and shoved to the back burner. The federal government electrified America as part of the New Deal. The United States of America put people on the moon 50 years ago. We can sure as hell transform our energy system away from fossil fuels to 100% renewables today, millions of jobs in the process. When Bernie is president, we will act immediately to address our climate crisis. Together, we will reduce U.S. carbon pollution emissions by 71% and emissions among less industrialized countries by 36% from 2017 levels by 2030, consistent with meeting our fair share of emission reductions under the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's recommendations. These emissions Reductions represent the equivalent of reducing U.S. emissions by 161%. This effort will be enforced by an interagency council led by Environmental Protection Agency, so the EPA. They apparently forgot to put "the" in there, so about reading, I just try to keep up with the conversation. Well, I just wanted to cater and incentivize you to come back and you go, "Oh, he acknowledged me." Because in some people's chats, they can have like two people in there and they'll still act like one person isn't even around. Okay, as President Bernie will transform our energy system from fossil fuels to 100% energy efficiency, sustainable energy by 2030 at the latest. The New Deal provided inexpensive electricity to America through efforts like the Rural Electrification Administration. Oh, that word is a tongue twister. And the Federal Power Marketing Administrations. If the federal government was able to electrify America under FDR without computers or any of the modern technology we have available to us today, think of what we can do today. Municipal and cooperative electric utilities still provide some of the least expensive electricity in the country today. As part of the Green New Deal, we will expand on that success. Build enough renewable energy generation capacity for the nation's growing needs. Currently, 4 federal power marketing administrations, PMAs, and the Tennessee Valley Authority generate and transmit power to distribution utilities in 33 states. We will create one more PMA to cover the remaining states and territories and expand the existing PMAs to build more than enough wind, solar, energy storage, and geothermal power plants. We will spend 1.52 trillion on renewable energy and 852 billion to build energy storage capacity. Together with an EPA federal renewable energy standards, this will fully drive out non-sustainable generation sources. See, a lot of times when I go through these people's plans, they say something I didn't know about, or if I did, I didn't think about it. Like this right here, where they're talking about the PMAs and how they're only covering 33 states. I didn't know that. And it's something that none of these politicians are talking about either. So there's a lot of stuff and I guess that's why I hate that people don't read things that much anymore. If they do read something, it's a little itty bitty stuff. Because when you're talking about a policy, which is the U.S. acknowledging the environment is something that's serious. It's been going since the EPA was created under Nixon, over 40 years ago. You can't break that down in just a few sentences and little sound bites and whatnot. That's why I really like these detailed, descriptions of what's going on or what they intend to do. We will end greed in our energy system. Looking at Joe Manchin, the renewable energy generated by the Green New Deal will be publicly owned, managed by the Federal Power Marketing Administrations, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Tennessee Valley Authority, and sold to distribution utilities with a preference for public power districts, municipally and cooperatively owned utilities with democratic public ownership, and other existing utilities that demonstrate a commitment to the public interest. The Department of Energy will provide technical assistance to states and municipalities that would like to establish publicly owned distribution utilities or community choice aggression programs in their communities. Electricity will be sold at current rates to keep the cost of electricity stable during the transition. Build a modern smart grid. A smart grid means a resilient, secure, and intelligent electric grid that is capable of managing high amounts of renewable energy, charging electric vehicles quickly, and maximizing efficiency. We will spend 526 billion on a modern high volt underground renewable direct current smart electric transmission and distribution grid. Will ensure our transition to 100% sustainable energy is safe and smooth. I've been seeing a lot of people driving these electric cars, and there's so few spots where they can just, charge it up. So again, that's something else that even if it doesn't affect me, I think people should talk more about doing. Weatherize homes and businesses to perform energy efficiency upgrades to make buildings more energy efficient and lower energy bills. We will provide 2.18 trillion for sliding scale grants for small businesses to invest in weatherizing and retrofitting their homes and businesses. Weatherization will reduce residual energy consumption by 30%. Because our mobile home stock is leaky and very and often very old, we plan to replace all mobile homes with zero energy modular homes. As we move forward with energy efficiency efforts, we'll prioritize the oldest, leakiest, and least energy efficient homes and the homes of seniors, people with disabilities, and low income families first. A federal mandate through the Department of Energy will ensure that new and existing commercial buildings and wealthy homeowners meet our energy retrofit goals. I told you another thing Trump will always be remembered by me for is sticking Rick Perry, a guy that said he wanted to abolish the Energy Department as president, as the Secretary of Energy. That is the ultimate irony. Electrify homes and businesses. One of the best ways to ensure that everyone's comfortable in their home on the hottest days of summer and the coldest days of winter is to bring all non-electric uses of energy onto the electric grid, for example. So many of our homes will use dirty oil, propane, and fracked natural gas for heating and cooling. We plan to provide 964 billion for sliding scale grants for low and moderate income families and small businesses to invest in cheaper electricity for these needs. A federal mandate through the Department of Energy will ensure that all new construction, existing big business, commercial buildings, and wealthy homeowners meet our electrification goals. Hey, be still. If you don't start leaving some comments, I'm gonna send you a video of Jerome Powell, and you can listen to him talk about interest rates. The environment isn't hard to possess. The planet can be fixed. Just going from region. Well, yeah, these countries are supposed to get together. No, the joke there with the Powell thing is that he's like if you saw Trump's tweet, he said that between Powell and the president of China or the head of state of China, they're the biggest adversaries for the US. So I'm going to send you, you can listen to one of those evil doers instead of me. Phase out the use of non-sustainable sources. This plan will stop the building of new nuclear power plants and find a real solution to our existing nuclear waste problem. It will also enact a moratorium on nuclear power plant license renewals in the United States to protect surrounding communities. We know that the toxic waste byproducts of nuclear plants are not worth the risk of the technology's benefit, especially in light of lessons learned from the Fukushima meltdown and the Chernobyl disaster. To get to our goal of 100% sustainable energy, we will not rely on any false solution like nuclear geoengineering, carbon capture, and sequestration, or trash incinerators. Those false solutions. Well, Trump is the chosen one to confront China. Yeah, he was handpicked by the Electoral College, minus 3 million people that voted for the other person, who was a piece of trash too. But you get the point. He looked up to the heavens as the sun shedded down, as he said, "What more proof do people need that he is the chosen one?" I like how you put chosen, then you click enter, and then you put one after. Like he's having this deity look down on him, and it's like, you are the chosen, and then dot 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 one. Regulate all dangerous greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide is a very dangerous greenhouse gas, but it is not the only one we must address. Methane is 86 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere, and hydrofluorocarbon HFCs can be more than 1,000 times more powerful. In order to ensure we reach our carbon pollution emissions goal, the EPA will under the Clean Air Act regulate carbon dioxide, methane, and HFCs. By aggressively enforcing our laws, we will end the injustice of 100,000 Americans dying every year from air pollution. Damn. I'm going to look that up after this. I want to see if that's true or not. If that is, then it's really ridiculous no one is talking about this. How the hell do you have a tenth of a million people dying every year from this? It doesn't make the news at all. So I said I live in the twilight zone. Stuff that people, even if you didn't think this is the right solution, I don't see how any reasonable person would just be okay with that not being acknowledged. Declare a climate emergency. There is a climate emergency which demands a massive scale mobilization to halt, reverse, and address the consequences and causes. Bernie will declare a national emergency on climate change and take immediate large scale action to reverse its effects. This is an existential threat, and we will do whatever it takes to confront it. Transportation. We can and must transform our transportation sector away from fossil fuels to create a sustainable future for all and good paying union jobs right here in America. Transportation currently accounts for 29% of domestic emissions. We will create domestic energy alternatives to power our cars and trucks and move our transportation sector beyond oil. By running our cars and trucks on renewable sources, we will build affordable, reliable, quick, and efficient public transportation and high-speed passenger and cargo rail. And we will create millions of good-paying unionized jobs building the automobile fleet of the future. We will invest in nationwide electric vehicle charging infrastructure to increase access to these resources for all, just as we built an interstate highway system in the 1950s and 1960s. I wish you would credit Eisenhower for that, but whatever. We will move beyond oil toward an electric car. Concerns of cost and whether there will be access to charging stations have prevented many people from being able to choose this low carbon option. We are going to change that. When Bernie is president, he is going to fully transform our energy sector away from fossil fuels, ensuring no one is priced out of this transportation. As president, Bernie will fully electrify and decarbonize our transportation sector. We will create a federal grant and zero emissions vehicle program to create a 100% renewable transportation sector. Zero emission vehicle programs are already having success all across the country. In order to transition to 100% electric vehicles powered with renewable energy instead of expensive fossil fuels, we will institute, okay, here's the thing, grants to purchase a new EV. What the hell is that? Provide 2.09 trillion in grants to low and moderate income families and small businesses to trade in their fossil fuel dependent vehicles for new electric vehicles. That's like the reverse of yeah, poo, I know, whatever. People like to show up when they want to. Sometimes I even know why I bother telling people the times of these streams, because they just whatever. What was I gonna say? I got cut off right for that. Oh, this reminds me of the thing in France, but the reverse, where Macron, the president over there, was like, buy these new cars. And everybody bought the new car. And then he said, I made a mistake. And people were pissed off because nobody can just keep buying a bunch of different cars. That's why the protesters over there have a huge approval rating, because he pissed them off with his thing. Okay, I found out politicians are basically people who decide where the money go. Well, yeah, that's the whole point of I mean, they're in charge of the laws. You know that beast still. Come on, give me a break. They're not even special. They bring their personality to work and choosing to fund their ideals and make it policy. Yeah. I mean, look at the NRA. They give somebody a couple $1 million and they can sit there and, chew that wad of cash. People get shot to pieces and talk about all the laws are fine. So, this stuff is really weird, but it all goes back to personality and, influence and what people decide becoming policy. And you get the picture. Okay. Vehicle trade-in systems provide 681 billion for low and moderate income families and small businesses for a trade-in program to get old cars off the road. Families with a conventional car will be able to access an additional incentive for trading in for an American-made electric vehicle. The Obama administration conducted a successful trade-in program that helped accelerate the transition to more efficient cars. We will expand on the program and make it stronger by requiring even higher efficiency and make it available only to cars manufactured in the U.S. The reason they mention only in the U.S. is because they don't want to help out the economies of these other countries. Like, it's all part of that whole thing of domestic stuff. You get the picture. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure. In order to ensure that no one is ever stranded without the ability to charge their vehicle, we will spend 85.6 billion building a national electric vehicle charging infrastructure network similar to the gas stations and rest stops we have today. We will also ensure that new EVA stations are open access and interoperable. I'm sorry, man. Some words I just can't do. Intro interoperable between all payment systems. Under our plan, drivers will no longer need to worry about where to charge their cars or if they can pay for it. Uh, Pooh says, "Well, it's even more weird when they ban straws but not guns." Yeah, that makes no sense, but that's actually a thing people like to do. They tell you about the public safety hazard of the straw, but not of the thing that can literally blow someone's brains out if it's held to their head or just a distance away. School and transit buses provide 407 billion in grants for states to help school districts and transit agencies replace all school and transit buses with electric buses. The EPA clarifies diesel exhaust as a probable human carcinogen, and this exhaust contains over 40 different chemicals and air pollutions that are classified as hazardous air pollution under the Clean Air Act. Children on school buses are exposed to concentration of these substances that can be 5 to 15 times higher than background levels, negatively impacting their health and performance in school. Once older buses are replaced with clean electric buses, school districts will save in fuel and maintenance cost over the life cycle of the bus. So, oh, I had no idea this thing was this long. I'm gonna read up to, let's see here. Wow. Okay, at the end of this part, then that'll be it. Replace all shipping trucks because this nation depends heavily on goods that are shipped all over the country by trucks. We must ensure that they are able to keep up their pace while we meet our climate goals. That means we must spend 216 billion to replace all diesel tractor trailer trucks with fast charging and long range electric trucks. Truck drivers from the largest fleets to small owner operations will be able to access this funding. Ensure the decarbonization of the transportation sector. When we are in the White House, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Transportation will assist in decarbonization of personal and commercial vehicles through regulation enforcement and technical assistance. President Trump weakened first mention of him in here. President Trump weakened clean car mandates on auto manufacturing, which some manufacturers opposed. Our administration will work with schools, transit agencies, cities, states, and private companies to establish standards for automation manufacturing to be 100% sustainable by 2030. That's a year people love for some reason, 2030. Build public transit that is affordable, accessible, fast, and resilient. With a 300 billion investment, we will increase public transit ridership by 65% by 2030. We will ensure that reliable, affordable public transit is accessible for seniors, people with disabilities, and rural communities. In addition to expanding transit service to communities, we will promote transit-oriented development and link this service to popular destinations and vital community services. For too long, government policy has encouraged long car commutes, congestion, and dangerous emissions. The Green New Deal will reverse these trends and create more livable, connected, and vibrant communities. Build regional high-speed rail. Many other developed nations have advanced high-speed rail systems. A 607 billion investment in a regional high-speed rail system would complete the vision of the Obama administration to develop high-speed inner-city rail in the United States. I don't usually want them to complete any vision of that particular president, but I don't see the problem with the railroads or the rail system being improved. Okay, this new system will give travelers a meaningful, affordable alternative to plane or car travel between major cities. The reason high-speed rail has not worked in the United States is because we have not built the political mobilization here to demand the funding needed to complete this vision. Together, we will create the movement needed to develop high-speed rail, retrofit dangerous fossil fuel infrastructure. In 2013, 800,000 gallons of crude oil was spilled in railroad accidents. In 2014, an average of one oil train derailed every 5 days. Damn. The Federal Railroad Administration will adopt new rules requiring companies to retrofit the coal and oil bomb trains to prevent explosions, derailments, and spills. We will take similar action to protect communities' well pads, substations, compressor stations, and pipelines as we remove fossil fuels to better protect communities that never asked to be cited in their footprint. All right, well, that is, I'd say maybe like 30% of that plan. He's got the research and development part down here, which is several more paragraphs. Use the power of international leadership. I would like to read that part probably on my own because I'm a big person I'm a person that's into international issues. So to see how these different countries interact with each other, it would be interesting. But look, someone might say to themselves, why just sit there and read this enormous plan that most people aren't going to pay attention to? And I said, because, and you heard me say, if to be still earlier, there are certain things that are mentioned in these plans that you don't hear on TV because it's all chalked up to just little small sound bites. Like I read the article when this came out on Thursday from The Hill, and they did a better job than TV did, which is embarrassing because they're supposed to be a news article that's not that long to read. But they didn't mention any of the different costs that were laid out. The only thing I remember about anything having to do with international climate change or how it affects the entire world, like a global effort, was rejoining the Paris Agreement. It was completely devoid of talking about the United Nations and getting involved with these other places. Just nothing. And the railroad system thing was completely ignored. You heard this part in here about the every 5 days that thing happened. Like you would never see that on TV. So I'm so, grateful to myself for actually being willing to sit there and check that stuff out. And it's a little bit harder to do when you're reading it aloud because, you have to, like, I guess, strain your throat or whatever. But it is what it is. So, probably my favorite plan he's put out, really that anybody's put out in the whole election cycle. Certainly, detailed and thorough, and there are parts in there that are kind of annoying, like when you talk about these good paying positions. Well, what do you mean they're going to be good paying? As in, they're going to meet the $15 minimum wage that all the Democrats should be at this point, or they're going to, I don't know. There's no specification in areas like that. When they start using the platitudes of this will be a strong position, like, specify, because that's one of the things I like about Sanders, that in this plan, he starts talking about this will cost billions of dollars, we'll pay for it this way. You have people who ask, how will you pay for single payer, for example, or Medicare for all? And he talks about taxing 2% on Wall Street speculation. That's something that all these damn idiots on Fox and these other networks are going to completely ignore and act like didn't even happen. I saved the clip on my computer of him being asked that question by what was a conservative on MSNBC, and him answering it. Just because I know people will still act like there was no specification ever given by him on how he would address this. So I'm just saying, when you look deep enough for stuff, you can find it if it's there. Now, if he was like Harris, would be like, well, I'm for eliminating private insurance in January, but ask me again in 2 months, and maybe I'll tell you I'm for keeping some of it. Like, just pick a side. And the few times they do put out fully detailed plans, I can't remember what exactly it was, but she got mocked because she put out some plan that people were making fun of on Twitter. I don't remember what exactly it was, but you get the point that when these people put out stuff, they usually earn ire because it's not practical. Like, oh, here's my healthcare system that's going to take a decade to come into place, and that most likely will have a Republican in there anyway. Especially if the pattern of these last couple of presidential elections keeps going, where you've got a Republican every or Democrat every 8 years after one person serves for two terms. You get the idea that based off of recent trends in these elections, we can reasonably infer that not only are you not going to be in power when your wonderful healthcare system takes effect, but a Republican might be in place and, cut it before it even can be implemented. I was going to actually kind of I think this might have come out the same day that Inslee dropped out. And the only reason I paid Inslee any attention was because he was the self-proclaimed climate candidate, making it the top issue. And I do like it when people who, even if I'm not their number one supporter, when they take a topic and just run with it and make it this thing that everybody has to give a position on. Like we had Yang with universal basic income. We have Tulsi with the wars, just stuff like that, where there's a reason for why they're running. Somebody like Biden or Harris or um, Booker, those people are just running because of ego and wanting to, and O'Rourke. We can go down the list. Castro. They're all running because they want the attention and the honor of being able to say, I was the president, not because they have some plan or some distinct set of ideas they want to get across. That's why all these idiots are sitting over here trying to still tell you Obama was some great or decent commander in chief. And it's so disturbing because it's like, you guys want to sit here and tell me about his 60% approval rating and how it's a suicide mission to critique him in front of the larger Democratic voting apparatus. Like, guys, most of those people who like him have ignorance. The few things he did that were good, I can literally count on one hand. Let's do them. Paris Agreement, good. Restoring relations with Cuba, good. Iran nuclear deal, good. Cutting deficit in half, good. A couple of environmental things here and there. Everything else, garbage. Like, how the hell do you even get to a point where you have to pretend that something that was awful is good or decent? I'll tell you why. When you're a coward, I'll tell you something like it is. You could relay with all of the, and I have tried to make streams or separate stuff where I just go into all the different issues with the Obama tenure, and you could give this to all of these different presidential candidates, including Sanders, and not a single one of them would be willing to go up in front of these voters and say, look, the reason we're trying to differentiate ourselves from him is because of two reasons. One is because the person who lost to Trump the first time tried to run as him 2.0, a continuation. And you had a lot of people who were down on their luck and just didn't want to see that be continued. So they pulled the lever for someone else. And secondly, because it wasn't some great, wonderful time that people like to pretend. The only thing I give him credit for advancing, like as a whole, if you just take one policy and say there were no negatives to it, was the environmental stuff. But even that got screwed over because he didn't want to, be antithetical to people like Manchin and, any other Democrat that wants to sit up there and try to like play patty cake with Republicans on stuff they don't even care that much about. You saw the Green New Deal when it came up for a vote in the Senate. Not a single Republican voted for that. And a couple of Democrats voted against it. Jones and Sinema, her, I'm a Republican with the D next to my name, with her Decepticon self. I really wish Arizona would have another. I hate that we have to wait 5 more years to be able to vote her out. She is awful. And I guarantee you, if whether it's Sanders or Harris or whoever, anyone that's got any slight ambitious environmental plan that kind of conveys similar ideas to the Green New Deal, where it's talking about there are a lot of positions that are not good for the environment, we're going to make some different ones or create some new stuff in place of that, you are going to see her and the rest of those centrist fossil fuel idiots be opposed to it, and end up being the people who stand in the way of it getting passed. And all the idiots that sit there and talk about blue no matter who and D this, they're not going to care because they're not going to see the sun that affects them. See, the thing people don't want to face and they don't want to accept is that a lot of this stuff and these issues that are directly impacting individuals are tied specifically to the lack of concern of others. That's why we've been in Afghanistan now for 18 years because people who aren't getting blown to pieces over there, people who don't have to worry about getting drafted or having someone, some loved one die, and that they don't care. It doesn't matter to them. That's why they actually the poll, and I think it was like 3% of all Americans consider foreign policy their top issue, which is really disturbing if that's true. I hope it's like, if it's not their top, it's like their second, close second, or something. Because if that's just the case, we're gonna, I don't want to hear a single one of them complain about the deficit. I don't want to hear any of them complain about uh, anything having to do with Americans dying or a limited amount of money because you've allowed through your refusal to pay attention to this stuff your cash to be suckled and dried and taken away to overseas conflicts in a lot of places that you don't even know where they're going or what they're doing over there. But then you want to look at an environmental plan where they say we need billions of dollars and go, oh, how are you going to afford it? Like, well, how the hell did you afford the other stuff? With pixie dust, huh? That was their solution, their little way of making the world go around. I just hope that one day people will, like before it's too late, if this 11-year thing actually comes to pass, take climate change seriously, and not get so caught up in supporting one party over the other to not just look back and say, if you have 97% of scientists telling you this is something that is affected by human activity, is this really just a thing that Democrats are saying to try to get you to vote for them? Like, really? I think that's how the country will fail. I think, everybody said that's why the country yeah. Well, yeah, it's going to be due to ignorance and purposeful stupidity. Like, I was telling you, I made an anecdotal story about the person who told me that sanctions aren't war. And then, you sit here and you have, you read them the comparisons between just, stuff where they want to argue about everything. Us worrying about foreign policy. Yeah, only a few of us do. Everybody else just like, whatever. Let my dollars keep going to these countries I can't even pronounce or name. I don't care. Who cares if we're blowing 85,000 children to pieces in Yemen every half a decade? It's okay. Just another day in the hood. So I will. I'll be back for another stream tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I hope that you'll both attend. I appreciate Be Still for the super chat. I went to great lengths to figure out how to put that thing into place. So it's very nice to see you follow up on your side of that thing. But yeah, thanks for both of you for showing up. I know it's not some really glamorous topic, but like I said, I don't care. Because when things are specified, I want to see it. I want to look into the nooks and crannies and make my own determination. And this is a sexy policy. I want to just take it and print it out and dry hump it. It's so appealing. But yeah, we'll see what else happens to later today. So tune in for the live stream at 6 Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and then if you don't feel like it, you can see the pieces of it that come out during the week. But thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it.